Dana, I criticized his lying about his own record, okay? This is a guy who was captured on video saying, I carried a gun in war. He never went to war. This is a guy who's been captured on video. As other people say, he's an Afghanistan veteran. He's a veteran of a war, nodding along in agreement instead of saying, no, I did serve my country and I did it honorably, but I never went to a war zone. I'm not criticizing Tim Walz's service. I'm criticizing the fact that he lied about his service for political gain, Dana. You've now asked me 3 questions about comments that I made 3 years ago. I wonder what Kamala Harris thinks about the fact that she supported policies that opened the American southern border. I wonder what Kamala Harris thinks about the fact that she lied to the American people about Joe Biden's middle facility for the office. You are interviewing me, Dana, because I respect the American people enough to sit down for an interview.
I appreciate that.
Kamala Harris has been the nominee for 3 weeks. She hasn't sat down for a real interview.
Believe me, we are asking. You're not going to get a disagreement there.
But the point is, Dana, you've got me for 15 minutes or however long you have me. We should be talking about public policies that matter. How are we going to lower inflation? How are we going to reduce the cost of food and housing? How are we going to close down that southern border? We've talked so little about that. We've talked a lot more about a sarcastic remark I made 3 years ago. I think we should talk about the issues that most Americans care. Kamala Harris is whatever she says she is, but I believe importantly that President Trump is right that she's a chameleon. She pretends to be one thing in front of one audience. She pretends to be something different in front of another audience. Look, Dana, she's not running a political campaign. She's running a movie. She only speaks to voters behind a teleprompter. Everything is scripted. She doesn't have her policy positions out there. She hasn't answered why she wanted to ban fracking, but now she doesn't. She wanted to fund police, but now she doesn't. She wanted to open the border, but now she doesn't. She should have to answer for why she presents a different set of policies to one audience and a different set of policies to another audience. And I think that's what President Trump is getting at. This is a fundamentally fake person. She's different depending on who she's in front of. Dan, I criticize people for not having kids. I criticize people for being anti-child. And I do think that Kamala Harris has made some bizarre statements. She has said things like it's reasonable not to have children over climate change. I think that's the exact opposite message we should be sending to our young families. I want to expand the child tax credit. I want to stop those surprise medical bills. I want to make housing more affordable so that if you have a young family, you can actually afford to put them in a home. And I think that it is unfortunate that so much of our public leadership has become anti-family. One final point on this, Dana. If you go back to the COVID era, one thing that really frustrated me, please.
Are you going to debate Tim Walz?
Of course. I want to debate Tim Walz. I think it's important, and I think that it goes to a very fundamental difference between the Trump-Vance ticket and our opposition. We believe in talking to the media. We believe in answering questions. We believe in debating. I think it's really important. I mean, look, I'm asking the American people to make me their vice president. It's really important to stand before the American people to make that case, and I'm going to keep on doing it in whatever forum I get the opportunity. So
we look forward to it. Thank you so much for sitting down and taking my questions.
Of course. Thank you for coming here.
Can I finish, Simone? Will you just shut up for a minute and let me finish?
Pardon me, sir. You don't get to tell me to shut up on national television.
We don't tell people to shut up on this show.
The American media wants to go after J.D. Vance for daring to question whether or not Tim Walz has engaged in stolen valor, cowardice, abandoned his unit, etc. Like, he's the bad guy here. Dana Bash is a pathetic loser, and she does terrible, awful things. In the clips that I'm about to play, you're going to hear 2 things. 1, Tim Walz's commander absolutely destroy him. 2, Brianna Keilar in multiple situations attempt to take down J.D. Vance for daring to question Tim Walz. Then you're going to see someone take down Brianna Keilar for trying to take down J.D. Vance. All these clips are well worth watching.
Is your concern that it's... Oh, go ahead. But I do want to ask this question quickly, Sergeant Major, and I appreciate your time. But is your concern about the manner in which he did not speak to you, or his decision to retire, which he, as we've talked about, he would have been entitled to do? Which causes the most concern? Because that is the focus that so many people are wondering about, whether he has done something wrong in service or done something personally to offend you.
He did something wrong in service. As I stated before, he knew the policies and procedures and how we go to leadership and address issues or discuss issues and concerns out there. Again, backing up, he had told me, no, I'm going forward. We're going to go with the battalion and go from there. So I'm under the believing, he told me he was going forward. I'm underneath that believing that he's going forward. He went around me which he should have addressed it with me so we could help do some things out there.
Sergeant Major, this was really... Excuse me, I don't want to cut you off, sir. Finish your point, please, Sergeant Major.
He went around me, and the fact is that there's possibility he probably realized I would have probably no, it's too late, you're going forward, because we had already received our notification of sourcing. And there's one other little point out there that people say, well, he hadn't been notified yet. Yes, he had been notified. Now, there's another step out there. There's what's called stop loss. 90 days prior to the actual deployment, we received our orders. And at that time is what's called stop loss, where if you're in a position, you're going forward irregardless, unless there's some really major or process that gets you out from not going on the deployment itself. So there's that window of opportunity there. People say we never knew he was going forward. Yeah, he knew he was going forward. Had he gotten his orders yet? No, at that time he had not. As far as being a command sergeant major, he, as soon as he retired, or I'm going to go with the term retired, which he did, and he was eligible after 20 years to get a full retirement. He was taken out of the academy at that time. Here's another thing about...
Well, Sergeant Major, I do want to hear that I do want to hear what you have to say, Sergeant Major. I know I want to be sensitive of your time, and your audio is beginning to break up just a little bit. But I do want to thank you, because I think you've clarified a lot for people and given more information. The question now is how the voters will evaluate it. Sergeant Major Doug Julian, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
I should note our show has reached out to the Harris-Walz campaign for comment and have not heard back.
I also think that J.D. Vance, as a messenger on this, may be an imperfect messenger, because we have, as you introduced him, as a combat correspondent, which was what his title was. But when you dig a little deeper into that, he was a public affairs specialist, someone who did not see combat, which certainly the title combat correspondent kind of gives you a different impression. So he may be the imperfect messenger on that. Informed observers connected to politics or the military, myself included, have noted that the Trump campaign is swift-boating Tim Walz. Attacks on J.D. Vance's service are also offensive. J.D. Vance served honorably in Iraq, a combat zone where anything can happen and frequently does. As he said in his book, he was, quote, lucky to escape any real fighting. That doesn't make his service less than. Lucky, he says. And luck is often what makes the difference in a combat zone or even a training mission, that today is not your day. In a country where so few shoulder the burden, military service should not be a liability. It should be an asset. And despite our recent years as a country at war, many service members haven't seen combat. That doesn't make them or their service less admirable or less necessary, nor does retiring from the National Guard after 24 years. These kinds of attacks from the left or the right diminish the service of so many others who have served honorably, who sacrificed time away from family, who put themselves in harm's way, because the military is made largely of J.D. Vance's and Tim Walz's. There are 2 veterans on these presidential tickets, 2 enlisted veterans at that. They have unique insight into what America's men and women in the armed forces and their families have been through and need. And shouldn't that be the focus? This is a presidential race for commander-in-chief. And so often that candidate or their running mate has never personally served, even as they vie to make decisions about sending people into dangerous situations. The fact that this year they do matters to a lot of people. It matters to me. In a family where we're raising 2 boys who idolize their dad's military service. 2 boys who are significantly more likely to serve because their dad did. And if they choose that path, it matters to have someone at the table who knows what that sacrifice means.
And I've also seen the criticism. Just going to point out that I saw yesterday where you talked about combat correspondent. And that's important to me as well. And that's not just about J.D. Vance. That's about all of my Marines, but not just Marines. All combat correspondents, public affairs Marines, combat camera Marines, graphic artists, all of those Marines and other service members whose job it is to go where the action is, wherever that is, and to tell the story. And those people, there's a hall in our public affairs school called Defense Information School of 130 heroes that served in that capacity who did not make it out of a combat zone. So that's important to me as well. That's why I'm here today, to represent my Marine, J.D. Vance, represent his service, probably try to send a message to all veterans, stand on your record, it's enough, but also defend those of us whose job it is to tell that Marine Corps story and to go wherever that story is.
And both of you, with your keen understanding of how this works, especially from National Guard families, I can tell you this, having been one of those that came back, we were in support of OEF, but sitting in there with OIF veterans, when we came back, they showed us the horse whisperer and told us to be nice when we went home. And that was the extent of it. That was in 2004. Now, I'm proud to say that because of the people sitting in here and people who came before me, things have changed over the last 4 years. They have not changed enough. But Mr. Kennedy is following and moving something forward that the late senator from Minnesota, Senator Wellstone, advocated so clearly: mental health parity, and this issue of destigmatizing mental health, of understanding. And I, being in there and knowing as a first sergeant, know exactly what you're saying, and watching as people aren't trained on this, that there is there's a discrimination that goes against a soldier who has the courage, the fortitude, and, as you said, the insight to admit this. So there's a couple things I want to ask you.